Talk for days just about Common Core and in how it breaks out into the other things that are involved. We could spend a year on it and never address everything. So I will try to go quickly and cover this quickly, but there's a lot of information here. I hope you get as fired up about this as I am and want to get this done within the next 8 days. The history of federal involvement in local education started in 1965 with President Johnson, when his big war on poverty passed out all kinds of mandates to try to improve the lives of the poor and disenfranchised, the poverty-stricken, the minorities. He enacted the Elementary and Secondary Education Act in 1965. Well, we know how that went. The whole thing was a huge failure, but since then, Fed Ed has continued through the Elementary and Secondary Education Act since 1965. ESEA was originally authorized until 1970, but it has been renewed every 5 years. The current reauthorization, which is expired, but it is in effect until it is reauthorized, and Obama wants to do that during this year, during 2013, to be the Common Core state standards. If it becomes federal law, as long as Alabama receives federal funds, we will be tied to Common Core. We need it repealed before that time. No Child Left Behind is the current reauthorization of that act, and it was horrible, and we're still under it. The Elementary and Secondary Education Act explicitly forbids the establishment of a national curriculum. Under No Child Left Behind, as bad as it is, it's nothing like Common Core. Adequate yearly progress is the means that they use to measure schools. The pros and cons, the pros are that No Child Left Behind allows some state autonomy, allows states to establish their own standards and curriculum, allows states to determine their own standardized tests for measuring student proficiency, and allows states to set requirements and methods for the evaluation of teachers. The cons of No Child Left Behind are just how rigid and narrow it is. It's too narrow for the goals to be realistic. The instructional focus under No Child Left Behind, and even more so under Common Core, has shifted from quality instruction and innovative teaching to test prep. Teachers have been taking their planning instructional time and turning it into time doing test prep and then doing practice tests, data collection, and data analysis. It has become a paperwork and documentation nightmare. My last year of teaching, I gave a pre-test at the beginning of the year, collected that data, disaggregated that data, conferenced with my students on how well they did on the test. We did another pre-test, went through the same cycle again, did another pre-test, went through the same cycle again, up to taking the final test. I was told, do not teach the required novel. Teach the test prep books because we have to pass AYP. There were increased administrative duties, federal regulations, and funding requirements have been placed on states. It cost a state $4 of state money to spend $1 of federal money. We're in a hole when we take it to begin with. Race to the Top by Obama is an all-encompassing federal mandate on education. It is an attempt to circumvent ESEA. Common Core and the aligned assessments violate 3 federal laws: the General Education Provisions Act, the Department of Education Organization Act, and ESEA. Common Core is all about big corporate money, power, greed, control. All the while the power grab takes place, a socialist agenda of indoctrinating our children is taking place within Alabama classrooms. Textbooks are all aligned to Common Core. And they do have, I reviewed every single language arts textbook that was up for adoption this past year. They do contain anti-Christian, anti-American, pro-liberal agendas that promote abortion, gay marriage, global education, sustainability, which is Agenda 21, and they also have all these social justice topics within books and on online resources and free materials. Videos and health units are already being used that align to UN programs active in the U.S. through the groups out of the UN for education, UNEP and UNESCO. Those are being done in the Birmingham area. Common Core State Standards Initiative is a set of nationally developed standards that are required of every state that adopts it. Currently, 45 states, including Alabama, have adopted it, and the Washington, D.C. area. It's also known from the federal level as college and career ready standards. Dr. Bice is trying to say, no, we don't have Common Core. We have college and career ready standards. He's trying to pull a fast one and it won't work. They have to have all the aspects of the federal mandate for every school that adopts it. This includes not just public schools, but also private and home schools, and I'll get into that in a minute. This is for any state or local districts. There are Race to the Top grants available for local districts as well. Tuscaloosa City has applied. Included in its control are the following: curriculum, scope and sequence, required knowledge, textbooks, teacher training, teacher evaluation, teacher job security and pay, databases, and the allocation of federal funds. Race to the Top and Common Core standards are like No Child Left Behind on steroids. It requires that states adopt and implement 100% of the Common Core standards with no additions, deletions, or substitutions. The Common Core standards are also called college and career ready standards. 85% of the standards must be the Common Core standards exactly as written. States may add no more than 15% of state-specific standards, but they will not be included on any required Common Core assessment. The Common Core standards or the college and career ready standards require that teacher evaluations be tied to results of student performance on standardized tests. Up to 50% of the evaluation is based on how well the child does on a standardized test given on a particular day. That they implement that school systems implement approved methods of teacher evaluation and employment requirements and participate in federally developed teacher professional training or similar programs that have been approved by the Department of Education. Teachers cannot get merit pay or promotions. These are meant to be punitive. The CCRS requires states to implement affiliated assessments or similar ones of their own which have been approved by the Department of Education and are aligned with Common Core. Alabama has approved and is this year piloting the aligned Act Aspire in 257 Alabama schools out of just a little over 400 nationwide. 257 of those are in Alabama. They are fully aligned to Common Core. Act Aspire contains, now this one's going to get you. Act Aspire contains Act Engage, a psychological behavioral assessment for grades 3 through 10, and it is to be given for a portion of those grades this spring. This is to determine your child's psychological attitudes, behavior attitudes, their attitudes towards school, motivation, but basically it is a psychological assessment. The child psychologist who was with me on Glenn Beck said that if he did those same tests in his office, he could release that information to no one but the parent. And that these are the kinds of things that it takes a trained psychologist to understand and interpret. This is taking place on a computerized test to be scored by artificial intelligence. It has a place where teachers may go in and make comments and rate the child on behavior and attitudes. This stays on their record forever. I knew of plenty of teachers who just plain didn't like a kid and would find everything they could to criticize that child. I would not want a teacher who didn't like one of my sons going in and making comments and rating his behavior to stay with him for the rest of his life. ActInspire also has work keys, which does psychological behavioral assessments on work ethic, work habits for seniors getting ready to go into the workforce or possibly college and into the workforce later on. 16-year-olds don't necessarily have the best workforce attitudes as compared to a 25-year-old. They still have some maturing to do. And what takes place in school is not necessarily what they put forth out in the workforce. Psychological and behavioral assessments as well as essay answers, as I said, are scored by artificial intelligence on a computer. It looks for keywords and phrases and answers that are given repetitively, the same type of answers. For work keys, participating employers may access this data. So if Mercedes-Benz is cooperating with Tuscaloosa County and they give work keys and somebody applies, they can go in, the human resources person from Mercedes-Benz can go in and look at this child's complete record. This is for the test that we're giving. This is their privacy policy. And without the repeal of Common Core, even if we pass a Privacy Act only, a privacy bill, this is what we've already signed on to. It says that they can and will collect personally identifiable student and family information, and it can and will be shared with third parties at their discretion. Not so confidential. Textbook companies are now preparing nationalized versions of student text aligned with Common Core and following the social culture of the present administration. As I said, I've personally reviewed those textbooks. Through the efforts of just one teacher, the director of our group, Alabamians United for Excellence in Education, Sharon Sewell, who was on the textbook committee, she wrote 5 minority reports to get 5 books rejected. They were books that if a student had brought the reading material to school, they would have been suspended. But it was in a textbook. If they'd written that, they would have been suspended. She had to personally write 5 separate minority reports to get those books rejected. And the last one, which was the least objectionable, they were still going to put through until Governor Bentley said, throw it out. Dr. Bice is taking credit for throwing it out. Despite those rejected, the common themes and the bias are still the same in all of the books, especially the global agenda and the political, the governmental viewpoints, the socialist viewpoint.